Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be exploring Neil Gaiman's The Sandman,
Ooh,
and specifically how it tackles power and responsibility.
right.
Now, for those of you who've already journeyed through this world, it's not just a simple story. It really gets you thinking. And we're going to go beyond the surface here, using this incredible academic analysis as our guide to really unearth what Gaiman's trying to tell us about power and responsibility, particularly with these larger-than-life endless.
Yeah, I think the endless are just fascinating because they're not just powerful. They embody these fundamental forces, right?
Okay.
You have dream, death, desire, destiny,
Yeah.
They each are kind of bound by this role, which, the analysis asks, is power inherent to existence itself? I mean,
That's a big question right out of the gate.
it is, it is.
And it makes me think about, is power in the Sandman a gift? Is it a burden? Is it some kind of twisted combination?
It's definitely complex. If we take Morpheus as an example, he's also known as Dream. He rules the dreaming, which is the realm of dreams and nightmares.
Right.
But the analysis points out that he's not like this purely benevolent overlord. There's this whole incident with Nada, who he essentially condemns to hell because she rejects his love.
Oh, wow.
And it's pretty harsh. And the source argues that it kind of reveals a pattern that Morpheus often chooses control over compassion.
That's rough. Yeah, it makes me wonder, does he ever truly learn? I mean, does the analysis consider his actions later in the series as genuine growth, or is it just, a more subtle form of control?
That's a good question, and it's something that the analysis grapples with, too.
Yeah.
Morpheus does change, but is it a real change or just like a calculated shift to preserve his power? The series kind of leaves that up to us.
It's so interesting how the Sandman makes us even question those concepts like growth and change. Speaking of complex concepts, let's talk about responsibility.
Yeah.
When dream is imprisoned, the dreaming crumbles. Nightmares are literally like leaking into the waking world. It's total chaos.
Right. That visual is so important because it really drives home the point that even for beings, like, the endless responsibility isn't optional.
Yeah.
Their actions have these huge consequences that literally shape reality.
Yeah.
It's not just dream. Think about Lyta Hall thrust into the dreaming while she's grieving, or Rose Walker. Suddenly she's burdened with this role of the vortex, a force that could unravel reality itself.
So nobody gets a free pass when it comes to responsibility in the Sandman.
I mean, not really. There are characters who definitely try to shirk their duties, but the series shows us that it never really ends well.
Right.
And what's fascinating is that it makes me think about our own lives. Have you ever felt that weight of responsibility, even for things that you didn't choose? The Sandman really taps into that human experience.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And it reminds me that even when we try to do the right thing, sometimes our actions have unintended consequences.
Oh, totally. And that's another layer that the series explores really well. I mean, even with good intentions, Morpheus causes harm. Like, for example, when he punishes Galt for trying to create a more empathetic nightmare.
Wow.
So his rigid rules clash with these genuine attempts at positive change.
It's like those times when doing things by the book actually just makes things worse,
Exact.
And speaking of making things worse, there's the Corinthian.
Right.
A literal nightmare gone rogue, wreaking havoc in the waking world.
The Corinthian is so interesting because he embodies what happens when power has zero accountability. The analysis calls him this cautionary tale.
Yeah.
And without responsibility, even good intentions can become something truly monstrous.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is we also see glimpses of his motivations, his desires, It makes you wonder, can even a nightmare yearn for something more than just destruction?
That's that moral ambiguity that Gaiman does so well, which kind of brings up another tension in the Sandman power versus freedom. Can you really have both? I mean, Morpheus is bound to his role, almost like his power is a prison.
Yeah, that idea of power as a prison is really thought-provoking. It makes me think about how often we might chase power without considering the constraints it might bring. And then you have characters like Lucifer who abandon hell, which represents immense power for freedom.
Right.
Would you make that trade? Where's your line in the sand?
It's a question that really stays with you after you finish this series.
Yeah.
It makes you reevaluate your own relationship with power and ambition.
Definitely. And speaking of these tough choices, there's Dream's dilemma with Rose Walker the Vortex. He has to make this decision to destroy her to save the dreaming, or risk everything to find another way.
Oh, talk about a moral crossroads.
Oh no, right?
Those high-stakes decisions, they're really at the heart of the Sandman, aren't they?
Yeah.
No easy answers.
Yeah.
Just this messy reality where even good intentions can lead to harm. Dream creates nightmares just as much as he creates dreams.
Exactly. And the analysis dives into this too, highlighting how the Sandman forces us to confront the morality of creation and destruction. Can causing harm ever be justified for the greater good?
Yeah.
And who gets to decide what that good even is?
Right.
These are questions that, we grapple with in our own lives, and the Sandman doesn't shy away from that complexity.
It's definitely not a simple feel-good story.
No.
It makes you think, and sometimes those thoughts are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think that's also what makes it stick with you long after you finish reading. It's what makes it so powerful. You know what I'm realizing as we talk, even though we're talking about these fantastical beings, their struggles with power and responsibility are so relatable.
Absolutely. That's what makes this deep dive so rich. It's not just about understanding the Sandman. It's about using the story as a mirror to reflect on our own lives and our own choices.
Yeah, I love that.
You know.
That's a great point. I think you just nailed it on the head.
Thanks.
It's pretty amazing how these fantastical stories
Yeah.
can actually reveal so much about ourselves, isn't it? Thinking about Dream's choice to sacrifice himself to save the dreaming, it really struck me how the Sandman elevates that whole idea of sacrifice as the ultimate act of responsibility.
Oh, that's a powerful observation. And the analysis really emphasizes that point too. Sacrifice isn't just about giving something up. It's about understanding the weight of your duty and being willing to make those hard choices, even if it means, personal loss.
Right.
It really makes you think, is there any greater expression of power than willingly giving it up for something larger than yourself?
It really challenges how we typically think about power,
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about control or dominance. Sometimes it's about letting go.
Right.
And the Sandman doesn't shy away from showing us how difficult and even agonizing those sacrifices can be.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Orpheus Dream's own son.
Right.
His story is steeped in myth and tragedy. And the analysis highlights how Orpheus's choices, fueled by love and grief, lead to profound suffering for himself and those around him. It's a brutal reminder that even with the best intentions, sacrifices can have unforeseen and devastating consequences.
It makes me think about all those classic myths we hear growing up. They always seemed so distant. But the Sandman makes them feel incredibly real and relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Orpheus isn't just a name in a story. He's like a reflection of the pain and loss we all experience.
That's the brilliance of Gaiman's writing. He takes these grand mythic figures and makes them so human.
Yeah.
And it's not just Orpheus either. Think about Nana, the woman who's condemned to hell by Morpheus.
Right.
The analysis points out that her story is about so much more than just romantic rejection.
Oh.
It's an indictment of power imbalances and abuse of authority.
Wow.
She chooses defiance. She chooses to resist this being that she once loved.
It's interesting. Both Orpheus and Nada, despite their suffering, refuse to be completely broken by these powerful forces.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, is there a kind of power and resilience in holding on to your sense of self, even when you're facing unimaginable hardship?
That's a really insightful question. And the series definitely suggests that resilience, that strength to endure and to resist, can be a powerful force in itself. It challenges this idea that power is solely about dominance. And it's not just about individual strength either. The Sandman also explores the power dynamics between the endless and mortals. Remember Hobgadling?
Oh yeah, how could I forget Hobgadling?
He chooses to live.
Yeah.
He defies death itself and ends up forming this incredible bond with Dream.
It's like even the endless can be touched and changed and even challenged by the actions of us ordinary humans.
Right. It flips the script on who really holds the power.
It really does.
And it reinforces that idea that power isn't this one-way street.
Yeah.
It's fluid, it's dynamic, it's constantly shifting in response to our choices and our actions.
Mm-hmm.
The analysis suggests that Hobgadling's story really embodies the power of free will, choosing your own path even when you're faced with these seemingly predetermined fates.
It's so inspiring. It makes me want to go back and examine all the power dynamics in my own life.
Yeah.
Are they as straightforward as they seem? Where do I have agency? And how can I use that agency to make a positive impact? It's like the Sandman is giving us this whole new framework for understanding power, not just in these stories, but in our everyday lives.
And that's what makes this deep dive so rewarding. We're not just analyzing a story. We're using it as a lens to understand ourselves, our relationships, and the world around us.
Yeah.
The Sandman shows us that power and responsibility are just completely intertwined. They're woven into the very fabric of existence.
Okay, so where do we go from here? We've explored sacrifice and resilience. We've challenged traditional power structures.
Yeah.
What are some key takeaways that we can apply to our own lives?
That's a great question. I think one of the most important takeaways is that power isn't inherently good or evil.
Okay.
It's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for construction or for destruction. The key is understanding its nature,
Okay.
recognizing its limitations,
Yeah.
and being mindful of the impact it has on ourselves and others.
Okay, I'm taking notes here.
Okay.
Understand the nature of power. Be mindful of its impact. What else? I feel like there's more to unpack here. It's like we're learning this whole new language of power.
Yeah.
It's not just about brute force.
Right.
It's about understanding all the subtleties, the ripple effects.
Yeah. The analysis really emphasizes the importance of empathy here.
Okay.
Whether we're leading a team at work or just navigating a personal relationship, seeing things from other perspectives is so crucial.
Right.
It helps us make better choices, anticipate those unintended consequences we talked about,
Yeah.
and ultimately, foster a sense of shared responsibility.
Empathy is a form of power. That's really interesting. It makes those moments when Morpheus does show compassion so much more impactful. Like maybe that's part of his growth, learning to tap into that empathy even when it's hard.
It could be. And the Sandman kind of pushes us even further by asking us to really question those traditional power structures. Yeah. Who has the power? How did they get it? Is it actually just? The series is full of these alternative models, from Lucifer walking away from hell to Hobgadling's quiet defiance. It's making me think about, where do I just accept the existing power dynamics in my own life, and where can I actually push for something better?
I hadn't thought about it like that before, but you're so right. It's not just about having power. It's about examining how these systems work.
Yeah.
Or how they don't work. It's like the Sandman is giving us this toolbox for dismantling those old assumptions and building something new.
And remember, it's not just about dismantling. Sometimes the most powerful act is about building connection.
Okay.
Think about Dream and Hobgadling, their centuries-long friendship.
Yep.
It shows us that power can be shared, mutual, even vulnerable.
That vulnerability piece is so important. It reminds me of what we were talking about before with sacrifice. Maybe true power lies not in what you control, but what you're willing to let go of, even those parts of yourself that feel the most powerful.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us to this crucial point. Power and responsibility aren't static. They evolve as we evolve. What might have been the right choice in one situation could be completely disastrous in another. So we need to be adaptable, learn from our mistakes, and constantly reevaluate our own relationship with power.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to think about.
It is.
But in a good way. It's like we've gone on this incredible journey through the Sandman, not just for entertainment, but to really learn something about ourselves and the world.
Exactly. And as we kind of wrap up this deep dive here, I really encourage you to hold on to these insights, Think about the roles you play in your own life. What kind of power do you hold? And what responsibilities come with that power? How can the Sandman's exploration of these themes help guide you as you navigate the complexities of power in your own world?
It's not always easy, but it's definitely a journey worth taking. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Sandman.